Wade being overturned with the addition of a new Supreme Court justice. If this happened under Michigan law, providing or receiving an abortion would become a felony. If this were to happen during your term in office, would you be willing to take the lead to ensure abortion rights for those who need them?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that is, like I just mentioned, the Supreme Court makeup in this country is changing. We're turning to a, like I said, more far-right judicial system, Supreme Court. And Roe v. Wade being overturned is a real possibility now that we have Trump in office. And we have to take a look at exactly what we do on the state level. At the end of the day, if Roe v. Wade is overturned, essentially that will take it right back to the states, and the states will have to either pass legislation that allows for women to access health care, such as an abortion, if they so choose. And if they don't, then some states would be able to ban abortion in some states. So absolutely, I would be leading the charge immediately upon Roe v. Wade being if it were to be overturned, to make sure that women's health care rights and access to health care procedures are protected within our state, and making sure that we find a way to make sure that we embed that into our state constitution to ensure women's rights in our state.
Alexandria?
Thank you. So I was actually a pro-choice activist at Michigan State many years ago, and at that time advocated for the rights of women. Ultimately, my thought is that irrespective of your religious beliefs, a woman has a right to choose what she does with her body, and the government should not interfere in that choice. And like I said, when I was at Michigan State, we held rallies, we organized a march to DC. I mean, I've already done that and would be more than happy to do it again, because as a woman, even though I have children, I respect the rights of other women. And again, the government cannot tell us as women what we can and cannot do with our bodies, so absolutely I would.
All right, thank you. Legalized recreational marijuana will be on the ballot this November. It's currently expected to pass overwhelmingly. Do you support legalization? And if legalized, what should happen to those currently in prison for marijuana-related crimes? Alexandria?
Yeah. Of course. I support decriminalization of marijuana. I've supported for many years. As I said, I've been a criminal defense attorney. The reason that I support the legalization of marijuana is because what I have seen, what it has done to the communities with people of color, is such disproportionate sentences for people of color, and it's sickening. In Wayne County, obviously it's a little more lax, so somebody who has marijuana, they're likely not going to jail. However, in Oakland and Macomb and Washtenaw counties, they are locking people up for marijuana, and not even large quantities of marijuana. And so I support it for a multitude of reasons. From a criminal defense perspective, I don't think that marijuana is worse than alcohol. In fact, I think alcohol is far detrimental than marijuana is. Marijuana has so many therapeutic and medicinal effects, and so I would absolutely support that. And I would support, and I don't know how likely that is for someone who's in prison, because usually our criminal laws aren't retroactive, but I would support and propose that they are retroactive to allow those who are currently serving sentences. I guess my only concern with it is how it would be dealt with concerning law enforcement. So for example, everybody's familiar with drunk driving. So OWI is measured based on levels. And I don't know if anyone knows, you can get an operating while intoxicated for also the presence of drugs in your system. And so that would be my biggest concern, is how do we handle the law enforcement piece. But outside of that, I think that the legalization can provide many benefits, an additional source of revenue to the state. Obviously, it won't fix all of our revenue issues, but it will be an additional source of revenue. But yeah, I support it. I think, obviously we have to work out some things with respect to law enforcement and how that will work and the quantities, but I do support it, and I support the rescinding of those sentences for those serving crimes.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I've been a medical cannabis supporter. I've been a cannabis supporter. You name it. It's something that the state should have done a long time ago, I think. And now we're looking at a November ballot initiative that would decriminalize and make it recreational. But that's something that we need to take a look at. On the city level, currently we're looking at the medical marijuana in the city of Taylor, and a lot of cities are looking at it across the state of Michigan. But I think that one of the things we have to do with this is making sure that we, as a legislature, once this is passed in November, is to make sure we have legislation ready to go in order to make sure cities and townships and villages within the state of Michigan can make their own plan on how they implement the recreational use here in the state of Michigan. Because as a council member and as a city government official, one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last 5 years is that you have to allow communities to enact this themselves to make sure that they're able to control it at the local level and at the local enforcement level, in police, fire, medical. I mean, that's something that's very big, and we have to make sure that's a component within this. And to your second question on this is to looking at the sentences of folks who have already been in prison and for many years based upon marijuana offenses, and we have to do everything we can as a state to make sure that we're looking to vacate those sentences, because we cannot continue to criminalize this when we're living in an environment, and just because, you know, Washington tells us that this is a schedule drug that is, you know, on the same level as heroin and everything else, it's absolutely not. And we have to make sure that we're decriminalizing this, but at the same time looking at those who have been in prison for years for a victimless crime, and making sure that we're doing our best to advocate for them, and making sure that we're doing our best to advocate for those who have been there for many years, and now we're decriminalizing it, so we have to make sure that we're sticking up for everybody who has been a victim of this.
All right. There's lots of discussion about LGBT issues in Democratic Party politics, but often the T is forgotten or intentionally ignored. We decided not to do that today. With repeated attempts in the last few years to have transgender people thrown out of the military and multiple attempts across the country to police their usage of bathrooms, members of that community feel like they are under attack. What is your position on people being legally treated as the gender they identify as, and what policies would you pursue on the state level towards these positions?
Absolutely. And this is something that we're taking a look at. You know, the LGBTQ community as a whole has been discriminated against since the beginning of time. We're seeing some of the most egregious things happen now where, especially with who inhabits the White House currently, we have to see exactly what's happening to our LGBTQ community. What happened with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which is a policy in the military. That was, and now we see, you know, they're not allowing the transgender community to serve in our military. And really, I believe that if you are here, I don't care if you know, identify as LGBTQ or anything else, if you're here and you want to serve your community and you would like to serve your community, you should be able to do so. And we have to do our best too, though, from a legislative standpoint, to look at the Elliott Larson Act and making sure that we're embedding protections within that act to make sure that we're protecting the LGBTQ community as a whole. And that's something that, you know, we've been looking at. Like I said, my background is working in Lansing. I worked on many of these pieces of legislation that haven't gone anywhere, but we have to make sure we continue to push and making sure that we embed into the Elliott Larson Act that we continue to protect the LGBTQ community and making sure that we're doing our best to make sure we're a model state in protecting all of the vulnerable populations within the state of Michigan.
All right, Alexandria.
So I went to a law school with a friend who transitioned after we went to law school. And now she actually works in city government, and it has been sickening hearing the stories that she has gone through on her job on a daily basis because they know of her transition. And despite the fact that she's a lawyer, and it's unfortunate, and that's what I think people have to realize. You have to put your personal differences aside. Everyone has the right to be treated a certain way. Everyone has these civil rights, these protections under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act. And to me, this community is no different. So those same protections that are afforded should be afforded to those within that community. And like I said, my friend, I mean, the things on her job, there are no protections. She makes complaints. They dismiss it. And the only way, it's the same as when we were talking about law enforcement. you can't out-train bias and stereotypes and prejudice. The only way to address it is accountability, and the only way, unfortunately, to have accountability is expanding the right to sue for those individuals, because again, it doesn't matter what I think, what you could think is right, you could think is wrong, but we're all human beings at the end of the day. And so I would be in favor of expanding those protections that I would have. So if I was discriminated against, I mean, even though I'm self-employed, but if I was working for a law firm and there was some sort of discrimination, I would have a remedy. Under the Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act, I would have a remedy and I would be able to pursue a lawsuit. And so the reality is that is the only way to address it and to have accountability for these organizations and these companies is to call them out on it and publicly shame them through the lawsuit process.
All right, thank you.